Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, June 14th, 2019. Is it Flag Day today, June 14th? I think officially that's actually the case. Donald Trump will go out and hump a flag, I suppose, if he can get himself to roll out of bed at any point today. Apparently, he spent about an hour calling into Fox and Friends, discussing such important topics as whether or not Melania is the new Jackie O, whether or not the Air Force One is in need of a new paint job. He was very proud of himself for having had someone spend, I guess, official government time drawing up new plans for painting the goddamn thing. And he showed that to George Stephanopoulos all day yesterday. And, who knows, whatever else he was babbling on about for 50 minutes here. We babble on for 2 hours here, but we don't get to be president. I don't know. Maybe he should just start a podcast. Maybe that's something better for him to spend his time in. Maybe it's best that he spends his time talking on television, and he can't spend his time, I don't know, fake signing, fake declarations. For all I know, I don't know what was supposed to be on his schedule. It doesn't matter. That's what he's spending his time on. President Teletubby is going to spend his mornings that way from now on, I guess, when he's not playing Barbie Dreamhouse with either the Oval Office or Air Force One or any number of things. President Fabric Swatches. We've got all kinds of nicknames for him, and everyone knows that's how you show leadership in this country. Make up nicknames for people you don't like. All right, we got a lot to catch up on. A lot we could spend time on, because what's the point at this stage of the game in spending time covering what's happening legally or on the political front? There's no system here. We have no laws. He may or may not be the president. What are you going to do? Why bother? I don't know why I would spend time trying to analyze these things anymore. All right. Daily Coast Radio is live now. Bill has instructed me to tell you, all the way from Portland, Maine. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, issues a warning to all the Star-Spangled Banners in America. Today is Flag Day, and Donald Trump is out roaming the countryside. Watch out. That's right. You could be physically assaulted at any time. So I guess I'm right. It is Flag Day. Fantastic. We can all go out there and hump flags and paint ourselves orange, now tinged with red. I got another look at the George Stephanopoulos video. I guess the part of the interview that was taped elsewhere in some other seating area besides the Resolute desk. He's looking redder than ever. He's looking very two-tone orange and pink inside the Oval Office, but he's quite red, and I think they've been cooking him in the microwave just a little too long. All right, Sean McCabe explains the Fox and Friends debacle. See, it's 50 minutes because Trump gets his phone cards at 7-Eleven, and they only had 50 minutes of talk time on him. All right, that could very well be the explanation. Might as well be. We might as well just accept that for what it is. All right, let's see. Where do we want to go? First, you know what? This looks like kind of interesting. I just saw Tegan Goddard's Political Wire tweeting around, I guess, a Jonathan Bernstein piece. Maybe we'll open it up, but he always gives us a good excerpt. How Trump gets away with neglecting his job. And the answer is very well. So far, no one has impeached him or arrested him to date, so I guess he's doing a pretty good job getting away with it. Jonathan Bernstein's piece below the headline here. The public focuses on the outrageous things he does instead of the crucial things, instead of the crucial things he is not doing. Like, nominating secretaries of defense and homeland security. In the middle, by the way, of trying to get us into a war with Iran. We'll try and get through the show without having one of those. Please, at least, I don't really want to cover that. So don't start that war until at least 11 a.m. Today. And really any day for that matter. So I have 24 hours or so to digest things before coming on the air. All right, one of the worst delinquencies of the Donald Trump presidency is Trump's continuing failure to fill executive branch posts. We've talked about this a lot. That's what makes this article so interesting, including important cabinet-level positions. I doubt that many Americans are even aware of it. I like the tactic, Jonathan. Just do the Donald Trump thing. Many people don't know this, but the president sometimes has secretaries of other stuff, and we call it a cabinet, even though we don't have any cabinets. We don't keep people in cabinets. There's only one definition of that word here, and I only know one, so it's very odd. Many people don't know that a cabinet doesn't actually have a cabinet. But okay, he doubts many people are even aware of it. We are, of course. Oh, and, well, that reminds me. Maybe we'll flow from there into the mechanics of how he's getting away with some of this stuff. But Bernstein, I think, has a larger picture in mind here. It's not that the news media are covering for Trump. It's just that he's getting close to a pass on his indifference to governing. And even to the needs of national security, because his indifference to governing and even to the needs, indifference also, I guess, to the needs of national security, because of what counts as news and how the media go about doing their jobs. You stupid media. All right. First, the media will tell you. I mean, he is media, Jonathan Bernstein. First, the latest on this continuing story. Over a month after the White House announced that Acting Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan would be nominated for the job. Over 5 months since the top spot at the Pentagon became vacant, and close to 6 months since former Secretary of Defense James Mattis announced his resignation, there is still no actual nomination. I think the story here, of course, you know what I think about this. The story is that he never does his paperwork. And that even when he says he's made a nomination, he hasn't made a nomination. And honestly, still, I think both the House and the Senate, well, you'll never get it in, I guess you could do it in the Senate by one person objecting. I would be objecting to every written communication being submitted from the president. But what do I know? Anyway, where were we here? Oh, yeah. So it's 6 months since Mattis announced his resignation. Still no nomination, even. And now it appears that Trump is having second thoughts. I guess I should say a second thought. That's probably closer. After all, in fact, it sounds suspiciously like no decision was ever made in the first place. And the White House only claimed that Shanahan would be nominated because people were starting to push on Trump for neglecting the Defense Department. Yeah, maybe. It's not as if the rest of the department is at full strength. Indeed, there's a similar, if not as extreme, case for the position of Air Force Secretary. Former Secretary Heather Wilson announced her resignation on March 8th and stayed on the job through the end of May. Trump announced on May 21st that he would nominate Barbara Barrett to replace her, but 3 plus weeks later, he hasn't actually formally submitted her name to the Senate. Over at the Department of Homeland Security, things are even worse. Trump hasn't bothered to select a new secretary over 2 months since Kirstjen Nielsen left on April 10th, and there's no deputy secretary either, well over a year since the last confirmed deputy secretary departed. These kinds of vacancies are just business as usual for the Trump administration, so why doesn't he get called on it more often? Well, for one thing, the media has been slow to digest just how blatantly the administration is willing to claim movement that isn't happening. That's true. That's the case for Shanahan, for example. Announcing him took the pressure off for a month, even though the announcement of a nomination was not accompanied by, a nomination. My favorite recent one, the Council of Economic Advisors chair Kevin Hassett departed on June 2nd. Trump immediately tweeted, "His very talented replacement will be named as soon as I get back to the U.S." Needless to say, no such replacement has been named. One rumor was floated last week, but nothing further. And, a lot of it, I think, depends on the still, I guess, existing assumption that a president of the United States wants a fully staffed government, and that isn't true of Donald Trump. Of course, there's also the assumption that a president would be embarrassed about not having a fully staffed government when the job was otherwise so easy. And that also is not true of Donald Trump. And then thirdly, they just think, well, if things aren't on fire, and windows aren't broken out and the department isn't covered in spray painted graffiti, well, then it's occupied. Everybody who needs to be there is there, as long as outward appearances are that everything is fully staffed, or there's no obvious sign of anarchy, chaos, and abandonment, then we assume, well, I guess everything's running okay. Or at least there are enough people in there to keep it okay, whether or not the president has actually filled those vacancies. And that's kind of dangerous. But the main reason this doesn't become a news story has to do with the way news is reported, which is in large part driven by what kind of stories readers and viewers respond to. It's your fault. For one thing, the media considers events to be news, but failing to nominate someone is a non-event. And Trump sure produces plenty of events, or at least quotes to hog the headlines, making it even harder to find space for coverage of non-events or continuing conditions. For another, people make better stories than institutions or processes, and this is a story about the absence of people. Things also get attention when they can be put into a framework of partisan battles, but the chronic vacancies aren't, for the most part, inherently a question of power struggles between Democrats and Republicans. Democrats could focus on it anyway, which would make it a much bigger story, but it's no surprise that they would rather attempt to publicize personal scandals involving Trump and administration officials, or governing questions that have clearer policy implications that Democratic-aligned groups care about. The other natural group to push the story would be the Senate. After all, by avoiding Senate confirmation, Trump is effectively harming that chamber's influence. But Senate Republicans have so far at least gone along, perhaps because there are no clear policy questions at stake. Poor administration can also become a major media story if it's tied to specific outcomes. Think, for example, how no one cared that George W. Bush put an unqualified crony at the Federal Emergency Management Agency until New Orleans flooded. But Trump's particular kind of terrible executive branch management isn't especially likely to clearly cause specific disasters. Instead, the empty desk problem will probably just make various departments and agencies more lethargic, unable to adapt to new problems, and less willing to be influenced by elected officials, all in ways that can be quite damaging, but without providing any easy, direct connections to any mishaps that occur. Well, I don't know about that. We'll wait and see, I guess. So that's where we are. A serious failure of executive branch management, but one that's unlikely to capture much attention or have repercussions for the failing administration. Okay, just a reminder that that is a story and it's a real thing, and you are well advised, I think, to pay some attention to it. Okay, other things happening out there, things to catch up on. Here's comments. Let's see. Michael Musson saying Trump is too lazy even to get his staff to do the paperwork. That is true. He doesn't want to keep on top of anything. Not going to bother them with that. Let's see. We have, he also mentions, actually, I think Trump doesn't fill vacancies because he's only comfortable pretending to run a small business. I guess that's possible, too. I think he doesn't know how things work. I don't know if he understands delegation really beyond get me a Diet Coke, or if he has a specific problem and he's on the spot and he's being asked about it, he'll just say it's taken care of or being taken care of and then turn to somebody and say, take care of it. But if the press never asks, where's your damn defense secretary, then he doesn't direct anybody to go get him one. So I suppose that could be what underlies some of this. Other issues, I mean, a big one for today. You can't avoid it, of course. Kellyanne Conway, by all rights, should be getting fired, but she's not because the president is a criminal and is harboring criminals inside his administration who help him run his political operation. That's all there is to it. Kellyanne Conway, repeat offender in violating the Hatch Act in particular, and what's the name of the HUD official who used to be the party planner for the Trump family? She's like the Region 2 HUD administrator. She did the same thing. But the two of them, I mean, she's much less high profile than Kellyanne Conway, of course. But I guess the two of them are engaged in a similar act here. But Kellyanne Conway repeatedly violating the Hatch Act. Of course, many people don't know that there is a Hatch Act, and that's because it's mostly honored. Occasionally people get accused of violating it, and it rarely goes anywhere because they give people an awful lot of leeway in one or two violations of the Hatch Act. The general idea here is that you shouldn't be on government time and with government resources doing electioneering, campaigning. And it can sometimes be a fine line, of course, but Kellyanne Conway doesn't care where the line is, and she's constantly in campaign mode because she's a campaign person, and they stuck her in the White House. This happens fairly frequently, but usually they brief you pretty well, and they keep on top of things, and people warn you every once in a while, you really got to keep the Hatch Act in mind when you're making comments like this. She's just openly political all the time, and she gets called on it all the time. And this is where we now have landed on this thing, the Office of the Special Counsel. And I guess here we're talking about, let me look at the Twitter account of this. The Office of Special Counsel, it's not the Mueller office, but a regular freestanding and independent agency that basically is sort of a government-wide Office of Special Counsel, or at least executive branch-wide, just sort of keeping on top of, and this is where you would go to complain about alleged violations of the Hatch Act. And so it fell to them to put this report out. And here it is. The Office of Special Counsel recommends one of Trump's senior advisors, Kellyanne Conway, be removed from the federal service for repeatedly violating the Hatch Act. We happen to pick this up from Kevin Bogardus, reporter at EE News Updates. Interestingly enough, just that was the first widely circulated report of this thing. Here's a screen grab of their press release on it. OSC finds Kellyanne Conway repeatedly violated the Hatch Act, recommends removal from federal service, which is one of the things that I guess you can levy as a punishment against people who are impeached, by the way. Just thought I'd throw that one out there. Their press release reads this way. The U.S. Office of Special Counsel, or OSC, today sent a report to President Donald J. Trump. If it was written, they're in real trouble. Finding that counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, violated the Hatch Act on numerous occasions by disparaging Democratic presidential candidates while speaking in her official capacity during television interviews and on social media. Yes, you're not supposed to do that. It is, as I tweeted earlier this morning, it's essentially theft of taxpayer funds. You're paying a campaign operative to do campaign work with federal taxpayer dollars. That's supposed to be against the rules, but so is everything he's doing, and LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. Although the president and vice president are exempt from the Hatch Act, that's the way of dealing with the difficulty of drawing the line between political activity and official activity for someone who embodies a little bit of both. He's got to run for president, right? And he's got the he's got the right to speak up about how politics goes in the country and urge you to vote for certain people for federal office, or to support his nominations for federal office, or to support certain policy positions, even if he thinks it's just a political win for him. So it becomes impossible to differentiate all the time for the president and vice president. But of course, she's not the president or vice president. And there's apparently she's been trying to assert this idea that, well, I'm speaking for the president, so I should be allowed the same exemption. And the answer is no. You're supposed to actually do your job, not his. You're speaking for him, yes, but you could speak carefully or within the bounds of law. But again, LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. Although the president and vice president are exempt from the Hatch Act, employees of the White House are not. OSC's letter to the president accompanying the report refers to Ms. Conway as a, quote, repeat offender, and states Ms. Conway's violations, if left unpunished, and they will be, so let's read about what will happen if they're left unpunished, would send a message to all federal employees that they need not abide by the Hatch Act restrictions. Her actions thus erode the principal foundation of our democratic system, the rule of law. So in other words, no big deal. Today's report follows a March 2018 OSC report finding that Ms. Conway violated the Hatch Act during 2 separate television interviews in which she advocated for and against candidates in the 2017 Alabama special election for the U.S. Senate. Moreover, during a media interview on May 29, 2019, Ms. Conway downplayed the significance of the law as applied to her. When asked about the Hatch Act, she stated, "If you're trying to silence me through the Hatch Act, it's not going to work. And let me know when the jail sentence starts." Wish I could. Like with other presidential appointees, the president has the authority to discipline Ms. Conway for violating the Hatch Act. Given that Ms. Conway is a repeat offender and has shown a disregard for the law, OSC recommends that she be removed from federal service. OSC's full report is available here, and there's a link that you can click on, except I don't have it here in clickable form. But trust me, they did say that. I don't know whether the link works. I don't know whether the full report is persuasive, but they did say that, and I'm not even kidding. They really did. In the meantime, I don't know whether she has talked about it or not, although Atrios and many others immediately, of course, recommended quite rightly that the media not book her for the weekend talk shows or give her any media appearances at all anymore, given that, 1, it's likely she'll use it to violate the Hatch Act again, and 2, she's a repeat violator of the Hatch Act, and you shouldn't be talking to someone who is so consistently engaged in political crime. But, the talk shows, they love having people who push the envelope. She's probably booked for at least 2 shows, and they can't wait to ask her, what do you think about having been accused of violating the Hatch Act multiple times and recommended for dismissal from the federal service? Whereupon she will violate the Hatch Act again. But hey, it's not their fault. They're just trying to something, blah, blah, blah. So, that's how it'll go. It only took a few minutes for the White House to issue statements rejecting the whole premise. And then finally, by this morning, there was word from the president himself, I'm not going to do anything about this. There's no chance I'm going to dismiss her from federal service. I'm going to allow her to continue to do this over and over again. Reuters reported probably, maybe an hour or so after this announcement, by way of update to the story, White House asks Office of Special Counsel to withdraw the report recommending dismissal of White House advisor Conway. I guess that was the second play. After, we dispute the whole premise and think that they're wrong. I guess that's the first play here. We might as well do this in chronological order. Let's see. I have a tweet here from Jordan Fabian, White House correspondent for The Hill. White House rejects OSC's recommendation that Trump fire Kellyanne Conway over Hatch Act violations, saying their findings are, quote, deeply flawed and violate her constitutional rights to free speech and due process. Due process? Are you sure about that? I mean, it's a dumb claim that they violate her rights to free speech. There are, of course, Supreme Court recognized limitations to that. On the other hand, the Supreme Court has new people on it now, many of whom owe their political careers to Donald Trump, and may just very well say, the whole idea of restrictions on First Amendment rights, sure, there are still some, but there are none where this Republican president is concerned, and everything is A-OK. A Democrat would, of course, be convicted immediately, and that is okay with us because we have robes. So I guess we'll just hold our breath and await that decision. Let's see. The link to the Hill's coverage of it in full reads, federal watchdog recommends Conway be removed from role for Hatch Act violations. I guess we can skip the background part, which we learned from the earlier report or the press release. I guess OSC sent a 17-page report to Trump, so that tells you how many pages went unread, I guess, and accused her of breaking the law on numerous occasions by disparaging presidential candidates, Democratic presidential candidates, etc., and calling on the president to oust her immediately. As a highly visible member of the administration, Ms. Conway's violations, if left unpunished, you know about that, would send a message to all federal employees that they need not abide by the Hatch Act's restrictions. And, people have been, I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether they're going to believe that they're going to have the same immunity as Kellyanne Conway, but it's going to make people angry anyway, particularly if they've been in federal service for some time and have seen friends and colleagues land themselves in trouble for accidental violations. And here's someone who's out openly flouting the law and daring them to come get her, by all appearances, getting away with it. The White House immediately rejected the office's recommendation that Conway be fired, saying its findings are deeply flawed, etc. Their argument here is, well, she's got free speech rights. You can't you can't invent limitations like no using taxpayer funds to do the president's campaigning for him, because if you do, then a Republican might get inconvenienced, I guess is ultimately going to be the law. Once again, it's okay if you are Republican. Under the law, the decision to remove Conway is, of course, up to Trump and not the OSC. So there's a problem right there. The independent agency, which is unrelated to former special counsel Robert Mueller of the Russia investigation, has never recommended that the White House fire an employee over Hatch Act violations. It said it did so with Conway because she's a repeat offender who had ignored the office's requests to follow the law. Why would you do that, right? The unprecedented recommendation fueled House Democrats, we'll see about that, who have launched a wide-ranging investigation into the president's administration, or, several of them, as you know. House Oversight and Reform Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings announced Thursday he would hold a June 26th hearing with the OSC on its findings, at which Conway will be invited to testify. Of course, she probably won't. And guess what? Elijah Cummings is going to hear from the OSC pretty much what they told him in the report. But that testimony they'll go out and get. Mueller, well, we don't know whether he'll show up. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. Except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We'll continue with the Hill's initial report of the White House's rejection of the premise of Kellyanne Conway's Hatch Act violations. And you'll see just how sort of brazen and how the brazen disregard for the law, precedent, and rule of law coming out from the White House, and just getting worse and worse as time goes on. So let's see. White House spokesman Stephen Groves accused the office of making a politically motivated decision to target Conway. What do you know? Its decisions seem to be influenced by media pressure and liberal organizations, and perhaps OSC should be, get this, mindful of its own mandate to act in a fair, impartial, non-political manner and not misrepresent or weaponize the Hatch Act, he said in a statement. I mean, obviously, the response is, if you were to find that a Democrat were in violation of the Hatch Act, that would be okay. That would be them being fair, impartial, and non-political. Accusing a Republican, well, that's clearly crossing the line. If you did that, obviously, look, she's a Republican. And so targeting her is obviously political in nature because she's a Republican. And so therefore you have violated the Hatch Act. You're the real racist and you are the real violators of the Hatch Act, OSC. That's pretty brazen. Kerner, a former investigator for congressional Republicans. By the way, who's Kerner that we're talking about here? I guess in the part we skipped, or at least the part we don't remember, I must have skipped the introduction of. Is that who was speaking for or signing the report for the OSC? Does it even say? Where's the initial appearance of the Kerner name? Here we are. Special Counsel Henry Kerner. That's, I guess, the actual officer in charge there of the Office of Special Counsel. The Special Counsel himself. So, where were we? Kerner, yeah. So, just to demonstrate, as, what's his face here? Stephen Groves said, this was so unfair, was not impartial, it was not non-political, it was an obvious misinterpretation and weaponization of the Hatch Act by Kerner. Kerner is a former investigator for congressional Republicans, and was nominated by, I don't know, some president to lead the OSC. I believe it was yes, look at that. It says right here in the sentence, Donald Trump nominated him to lead the OSC. Best people, as you know. One of the few jobs for which the president has actually nominated someone. Isn't that interesting? He began his job in October of 2017 after the Republican-controlled Senate confirmed him by voice vote. What a partisan hack. His agency found that Conway violated the law during more than half a dozen interviews with Fox News and CNN between February and May 2019, including by accusing Senator Elizabeth Warren of lying about her ethnicity, calling Cory Booker sexist, and attacking former Vice President Joe Biden's vision, as well as his, quote, very dark and spooky campaign announcement video. All three are running for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, as you know. It's also said that Conway misused her Twitter account for political purposes by stating her support for Trump's re-election campaign, tweeting, hashtag 2020, I'm with him. What a great slogan. As well as bashing Booker for sounding, quote, like a Hallmark card and dubbing Biden creepy Uncle Joe. The report cited numerous aggravating factors in the decision to call for Conway's firing, including its March 2018 finding that she violated the Hatch Act by weighing in on the Alabama Senate race, but failed to rectify her behavior. Pardon me there. I actually remembered to mute the button. That's got the allergens flowing through the windows here at the World Headquarters. It said the OSC sent a letter to Conway in December of 2018, warning her about the use of her Twitter account, and met with the White House counsel's office twice in March about her political activity during official media appearances, and then again in April about her Twitter account. They're spending all their time there trying to get her to stop, and she's just not going to do it. Conway scoffed when asked on May 29th about her Hatch Act violations, telling a reporter at the White House to, quote, let me know when the jail sentence starts, comments which the OSC pointed to in justifying its move. Her defiant attitude is inimical to the law, and her continued pattern of misconduct is unacceptable. Gee whiz, I guess we got the sound effect ready for that one. I mean, it is, they're right, but what are they going to do about it? Answer, nothing. White House counsel Pat Cipollone responded to the OSC in an 11-page letter, blasting its findings, how'd they get that ready so quickly, arguing Conway's media appearances and tweets are not covered by the law, and accusing the office of violating her due process rights by giving the White House inadequate notice to respond to its specific findings. They managed to get an 11-page letter together. What's the problem? The report is based on numerous grave legal, factual, and procedural errors. The letter reads, as a result, the current report would serve only to undermine public confidence in OSC and its procedures. Not so far, it hasn't. The Hatch Act, which was passed in 1939, bars the vast majority of federal employees from using their, quote, official authority or influence for the purpose of interfering with, or affecting the result of an election. It was upheld by the Supreme Court in 1947 and 1973. In case you were wondering, hasn't anybody ever tested this to see whether it is a violation of free speech rights? The answer is yes, twice, and it was found that it was not twice. Things have changed, of course, and Trump has his own members of the Supreme Court firmly in pocket. Maybe it's different now. Law, meh, who cares, right? It can change any minute. Conway is not the only White House official to find themselves in the OSC's crosshairs. Last year, the office found that 6 administration figures violated the law by tweeting political messages that were supportive of Trump. The office officials included former Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, the smart one, White House Social Media Director Stan Scavino, very nearly came out as Stan, like Scavino, that could be true, and Stephanie Grisham, also a social media director, she's spokesperson for First Lady Melania Trump, the new Jackie O. The latest ruling against Conway originated from 2 complaints made by watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW, you know them, which has consistently criticized the president and Trump administration's conduct. Conway's repeated violations and publicly expressed disdain for the law show a dangerous disregard for governmental ethics, the rule of law, and the long-held understanding that government officials should not use their official positions to advance partisan politics. CREW Executive Director Noah Bookbinder said in a statement, "We join OSC in calling for Kellyanne Conway to be removed from federal service." Well, again, sad trombone for you, because it's not going to happen. So, let's see. We had that, and then I guess next in time was what? The announcement that, oh yes, so the Reuters report that, okay, well, we understand, we dispute the findings of the OSC and accuse them of violating the Hatch Act in so finding. But ultimately, I guess people are going to ask the president, what's he going to do about this thing? And it would be best, I assume, they thought, if President Trump never addressed it at all and never had to address it because the OSC had in the meantime, in the interim, decided to withdraw its report. So why don't we pressure them to do that? And that was the next step, in fact. Reuters' Steve Holland reporting here. Government watchdog says that Conway should be fired. So let's see. The first part of the story recounts all of that. And let's see. We'll have to skip down a little bit to find the White House reaction. By the way, I guess some background here. Conway, 52, served as Trump's campaign manager in 2016, one of 2016 campaign managers he had during 2016, becoming the first woman to head a winning presidential campaign and is one of his most loyal aides and fiercest defenders. She currently is leading White House efforts on reducing death by opioids. That's 1, not working, and 2, not true. And Trump likely would be loath to have her leave the White House right now when he is cranking up his re-election campaign. Not really. As a matter of fact, if for some reason the pressure were to increase for her dismissal, she would simply, I think, leave for the campaign, and then they would say, there, you see, she's been dismissed from federal service, and she's just going to get paid the same, if not more, probably much more, over in this other office. And then she'll be able to say all the things that she was not supposed to say here on the federal dollar. We'll never get reimbursed, but hey, what can you do? The White House press secretary, who I guess is deputy press secretary, again, Stephen Groves making the appearance here, and I guess we ought to mention, word is that, although it seems like this was already announced like about a year ago and nothing ever came of it, that Sarah Huckabee Sanders is finally leaving. I thought they decided that a long time ago, and then she just never left. But then she just decided, I'll just continue to sit here and draw a salary and comment from time to time and go out in the driveway and yell at people, but I won't have any press briefings, so I don't care. I guess I'll just get paid and not do the official job. Anyway, Groves said the OSC action violated Conway's constitutional rights and was pushed by media pressure and liberal organizations. Okay. We heard about that. Democrats pounced after the report was released, but you probably didn't hear that much about that, and it's because it's not very scary anymore. Special counsel's office, a little bit of background on that. Again, run by lawyer Henry Kerner, confirmed by the Senate after Trump's nomination of him. In attempting to discipline officials as senior as Conway, the agency can only recommend action, not carry it out. Last month, they gave a couple more of the examples of her various attacks. And then, is there not specific coverage of this? No, I guess not. Maybe they're in a later write-up. But in reading the Reuters tweet, they hint here that they ask the White House asked Office of Special Counsel to withdraw the report recommending dismissal. And that doesn't appear in this article. And I'm wondering whether, has Steve Holland written anything since? Was that a new development and he was simply reporting that and then attaching his already published work on it, or what? I don't know. It doesn't appear so. So now I don't know what to do with this. Does this mean that didn't happen, or that he reported that initially and then maybe edited it out? Is there any update or anything? Usually there'll be an update that says it was earlier reported that yada yada, but no. No, I can't find it. But I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if they had done that. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, in that the next event in time was this morning's article that appeared in The Hill. And let me flip over to that one. Jordan Fabian's report. Trump says he will not fire Kellyanne Conway for Hatch Act violations. No surprise, but at least we have, I guess, official word on it. Oh, pop-up ad getting in the way. President Trump said Friday he will not fire Kellyanne Conway as White House counselor for violating the Hatch Act, rebuking the recommendation of a top federal watchdog. No, I'm not going to fire her. I think she's a terrific person, Trump said during a call-in interview on Fox and Friends. Remember, we started the show with that stupid thing. The president's comments came one day after the OSC publicly said she should be removed from office, calling her a repeat offender who has flouted the law, right? You know all about that. The office, once again, not related to the Mueller OSC. Trump said he will, quote, get a very strong briefing. Oh, he just has no understanding of how to use words. I'll get a very strong briefing on Conway's Hatch Act violations. God, kids, don't bother staying in school. What can I tell you? But suggested he will not recommend that she change her behavior. So that not only will I not fire her, I won't even tell her to change her behavior. It looks to me like they're trying to take away her right from free speech. That's what it says, from. It looks to me they're trying to take away her right from free speech, and that's just not fair, he said, whatever that's supposed to mean. 17-page report submitted to the White House found that Conway violated the law in more than half a dozen television interviews and tweets. You know all about it. The White House argued the OSC applied the law too broadly and violated her First Amendment rights. They don't discuss the due process rights here, but that was an accusation. The Hatch Act bars, you know what the Hatch Act does too. I'll skip that part and move on from there. That's the benefit of having read every single article in existence on this subject. But it's an important one, and it's dismaying, and I don't know what else to tell you. All right. Let's see. Along similar lines, I guess, I'll read you this piece here from Talking Points Memo, provocatively headlined, FEC Chair. Didn't think I need to clarify, but taking foreign dirt is 100% illegal. Yeah, I mean, that's where we are in the world right now. Nicole LaFond reporting here for TPM. The chair of the FEC took a transparent swipe at President Trump on Thursday evening when she posted a statement outlining the illegality of accepting anything of value from a foreign national in connection with the U.S. election. Yes, it's the foreign aspect on those things. And remember, these are the people who keep insisting that foreigners are cheating in the election for Democrats. They're coming to this country and voting illegally, and that's a problem because foreigners. Whereas the contributions to the campaign and the tipping off of candidates to supposed dirt that may or may not be real coming from, I don't know, foreign intelligence services that don't have the interests of the United States at heart and may in fact have quite the opposite at heart. It's all okay because it's just information. It's a very weird thing. It's a trap that Republicans seem to fall into all the time. They don't respect intellectual property rights because it's just a thing. It's just information. It's just a song. You can't own that. I'm playing it over the airwaves. You can't own sound. Sure you can. Absolutely. And there's a whole regime for that. And if you owned it, you would want to be paid too. But that's, that's neither here nor there. The point is, once again, it's okay if you're a Republican. And here, somebody gives me information. I mean, if it's true, I'm going to use it. And of course, if it's not true, I'm also going to use it. But the point is, it's information and it doesn't matter where it comes from. Even though, there's so many obvious problems with this, but he just sweeps them all under the rug. I mean, at this point, if I can take information from anybody, and it can also include foreign intelligence services, or foreigner, just independent, just average, everyday foreign residents, I guess, but who knows? And the reason it's all blocked is, we have this weird fetish in this country that our elected leaders ought to be elected by the people who live here and have a stake in it, but they also have to have a little talisman with them that says that they're allowed to have it. That is to say, we have to force them to wait around for a long time and tell us what was the name of the first president of the United States, and then everything is cool. But if you just live here, work here, pay taxes here, contribute to our national productivity, et cetera, that's not enough. You got to have the magic talisman first. But you don't need that if you just want to ruin the election or tell everybody lies about the president or the people who are running against the president or what have you. But, if you obviously it doesn't take very much imagination to imagine what could go wrong if you just say, it's wide open. A hostile intelligence service makes up some crap. Although I guess it would have been harder before. Like ordinarily you would say, people would say, what's your proof? But that's out the window. Nobody asks that anymore. So, take your pick. If you don't like blaming it on Russia, try any country you want. Just simply plant a story. And if you're worried about proof and backing your story up, and you're a foreign intelligence service, you probably have the wherewithal to concoct the proof that you need as well. And then the outcome of the election is directed entirely by somebody with hostile intentions and every interest in polluting the result with misinformation. But that's okay because something, I have a very wrinkled orange face. I guess that's all it takes from now on to do this. So anyway, FEC Chair Ellen Weintraub saying, I would not have thought I needed to say this, in a tweet, which did not name Trump, but was a clear reference to Trump's recent admission that he'd probably at least listen to a foreign entity that tried to offer him dirt on a political opponent. By the way, I did tweet this yesterday, but it bears repeating here. There was never any doubt in my mind, and I'm sure not in yours. And if you find yourself speaking to somebody who had some possibility of doubting, that's really all I can credit people with at this point. You can tell him why you knew that there was no doubt in your mind ever that he would accept dirt from a foreign entity. One, he doesn't care. And you know how he does things. He doesn't believe in law or rules of any kind. If there's something to his advantage, he wants to take it. And his ethics are, if it feels good in my pants to take it, then I'm going to take it, right? If it gives me that tingly feeling that I miss so much to find out dirt from a foreign entity, then I want dirt from a foreign entity. And who cares? He doesn't or claims to not understand why that would be wrong or problematic. But he's a very dumb person, so we have come to expect that. So if there was no doubt in your mind because of how dumb he was, that's probably enough. But if you wanted to add something else, an ethical element to it, just imagine the guy who says that he knows the family and has known Paris Hilton since she was 12, right? A guy like that who says, I know her, I know her family, I've known her since she was a little kid, who nonetheless jumps immediately at the first chance he gets to watch her sex tape. That is not somebody who's going to weigh the moral and ethical implications of taking dirt on an opponent from a foreign entity. Again, it gives me a tingly feeling in my pants, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to watch Paris Hilton's sex tape, despite the fact that I've known her since pre-adolescence, because my wiener says I should. I mean, that's basically what he does. And then to get dirt on Hillary Clinton, oh yeah, I get that same tingly feeling because I would really like to win a thing. What are you going to do with the presidency? Doesn't matter. I don't know. Who cares? It doesn't make a difference. The point is, it will make my name more golden. I'll be in the newspaper. Oh, but it's a huge responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility. You'll have to be working so hard. No, I won't. I just won't do it. I won't do the job. I won't nominate anybody anything. I'll go play golf all the time. I won't learn anything. But people will call you out for that. No, I'll just say I'll be very strongly briefed on it, or I already did the thing. So far, that's worked. So, I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, that's what governs his life. And no, he was never going to worry about something going wrong in all of this. And I guess maybe the best thing that could happen in all this, since we're not going to do anything, is a foreign government that, and sure there's plenty of foreign governments that hate that he's the president and hate him, but also love the fact that he's so easily manipulated. And so therefore there's a huge opportunity here, and they can plant information that is designed to backfire on him and finish him that way. I guess that's the possibility. By the way, if he were a Democrat doing this, James O'Keefe would already be in his office dressed as, I don't know what, an Iranian, offering up some sort of information and then stinging him on that. Abscam 2 is coming. You'll be able to sink this guy with a costume, no doubt. All right, continuing on with the Ellen Weintraub FEC chair story. Let me make something 100% clear to the American public and anyone running for public office. Not that it'll matter. It is illegal for any person to solicit, accept, or receive anything of value from a foreign national in connection with a U.S. election, she said. This is not a novel concept. Electoral intervention from foreign governments has been considered unacceptable since the beginning of our nation. But as I have often said, LOL YOLO, NM. Trump's remarks sparked outrage from Democrats. Who cares? And pushed some Republicans to speak out on the issue. Who cares? Some of Trump's most ardent defenders, like Senator Lindsey Graham, were clear that accepting foreign assistance during a federal election was a mistake. The story ends there. But the story of Lindsey Graham's comments don't end there. He walked that back soon enough and basically said, once again, it would be all right for Donald Trump to do this because it will also benefit me. That's where Mitch McConnell is, just on that and every other issue, including protecting the United States from future political interference from foreign actors. Senator Mark Warner coming up with a smart-ish move yesterday, asking for unanimous consent to take up and pass his bill. Basically, a bill outlawing and reiterating that it is against the law to accept foreign assistance and information for the purpose of influencing an election, to which Marsha Blackburn apparently drew the short straw and made the objection, although she might very well have really enjoyed doing it. I have an Axios report on that for you, but, I'm sure it was regarded as a stunt by the Republicans, and to some extent it really was, but it was a good stunt in that ordinarily people would think that's the sort of thing that you should allow to go through by unanimous consent because no one wants that to happen. The problem is that Republicans as a party do want that to happen. It's not just that they reject the stunt. It's that they actually want this to happen. Republicans like Blackburn, yes, but Mitch McConnell certainly. He did it in 2016. He objected to efforts to prevent it because he knew it would benefit him personally. Likewise, this will also benefit him personally in 2020. He's actually on the ballot this time. The reason he's blocking consideration of laws to protect the integrity of the American elections is that he plans to cheat to win them himself. And that is why he does not want it to be on the books for a possible future presidency, a future executive that would actually be interested in, seeing that the laws of the United States are faithfully executed, to arrest him for that. So it's self-defense. Here, though, the Axios report, Republican blocks bill requiring campaigns to alert FBI to foreign assistance. The whole idea of calling up the FBI should be a no-brainer, but Trump has removed his brain on that one, and everyone else's as well. Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee blocked this effort by Mark Warner to pass a bill via unanimous consent requiring campaigns to report any offers of foreign assistance to the FBI. So not even criminalizing necessarily the receipt of this information or the use of this information, but criminalizing the failure to report the offer to the FBI. Simple and easy, right? Warner then countered, so Blackburn, I guess, by way of her excuse, proffers the following. We are all for free and fair and honest elections. These reporting requirements are overbroad. Presidential campaigns would have to worry about disclosure. Yeah, they would. At a variety of levels. So many different levels. She sounds like Trump on this one. Consider this. Vendors that work for a campaign, or Princes of Wales, I suppose. People that are supplying some kind of voter service to a campaign. It would apply to door knockers. It would apply to phone bankers, down to any person who shares their views with a candidate. No, it wouldn't. Warner then countered that Blackburn's reading of the legislation is not accurate. The only thing that would have to be reported is the agent of a foreign government or national that offered something that was already prohibited. So, whatever, not a good excuse and not a good counter, or a reasonable counter by Warner anyway. We'll be back in 1 minute with more. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Almost forgot this was just the 1 minute break, but the sound of the music reminded me. So that basically wraps it up on the Axios report. There's a little bit of back and forth about this stuff. Not really worth spending much more time on other than noting that the stunt was attempted and that somebody had to rise to take the bait. This time it was Blackburn. And we are where we are. So, let's see. A couple other things about a million other things we need to get to. Same situation as always. We're just not going to get to all of them. Let's see. I think next up, let's grab more from Mark Sumner over on the front page at Daily Kos. This time, yesterday's write-up. This is the sort of thing, actually, I would ordinarily think might draw Armando into the mix. But I think it's pretty well stated here by Sumner, and we've covered the topic enough, but feels like it needs a little bit of reiterating going into the weekend. Trump's use of executive privilege, he says, is the greatest single threat to the rule of law. And it's so hard to isolate a single greatest threat to the rule of law. This was, I think, operative yesterday. Yesterday, I probably would have agreed, yes, it is the single greatest threat to the rule of law. And in reality, I guess it remains a contender for the single greatest threat. But that's only because nobody at the time that he wrote this, although by the time it was published on the front page, I think there was already a new contender literally a new contender for the single greatest threat to the rule of law. Probably everyone would have settled on this one because, although it's pretty simple to explain, it's a little nuanced for the average voter who's not a lawyer and doesn't follow these things closely. That is to say, I think people of average intelligence, with some interest in following a story for more than 30 seconds could figure it out. and understand it the way it was explained. Mark certainly does a great job of explaining it, and many people in the media do a great job. But I guess there are some people who would say, who don't pay attention or don't want to pay attention, who might not quite get it. And usually that's as far as it goes. Threats to the rule of law as a concept generally stay abstract, mostly because, well, constitutional law is sometimes a difficult issue to parse. And two, it is generally speaking not done for presidents to say, F law, who cares? And who cares what law it is? I say they all suck. And so I would not ordinarily have predicted that that was going to come into play and supersede the use of executive privilege as the single greatest threat to the rule of law. By the end of the day, the single greatest threat to the rule of law was the president's willingness to say, I don't give a goddamn what the law says. And people in my administration who are found to be in blatant violation of it will stay right where they are, not only not get fired, but will not even be asked to stop doing it. I guess that's the single greatest threat to the rule of law. And I guess we all knew it was coming, but, intellectuals that we are, we tend to focus on the things that are more difficult. And on this show, we state them outright, but they usually come out as humorous asides, but they're often very serious in the way I'm offering them. I say to you, or people say, let's say, murdering your political opponents. You can't do that, right? And, I always answer, normally people say, well, no, you can't murder people. The end. And on this show, we say, well, you're not supposed to be able to murder people, but people murder people all the time. Now, typically they get arrested and at the very least endure a very nasty trial, but even that is not always the case. Like now, if you murder people in the right way with the right weapon and then say you were in fear for your life, there are laws on the books in certain states that say you won't even have that nasty trial. You won't even be charged. But there still will be a period during which you will learn all about the billable hours scheme of the lawyer that you've hired. So, they're looking to minimize that as well. But, I keep having to point those things out. Well, that's against the rules of the House, right? You can't do that. That's right. You can't, except that you can because the rules of the House change all the time. Well, what about the Senate? That's harder to change rules. You need 67 votes to change the rules in the Senate. No, you don't. You need 50. You need 67 votes to end a filibuster of a proposal to change the rules. But you don't even really need that because you could change the rules about how many votes you need to change to invoke cloture on a rules change as well. We spend a lot of time on that on this show. So, okay. Trump's use of executive privilege is the second greatest now single threat to the rule of law, the first being the outright rejection of the rule of law on its face. So that's where we are now. Now, where we were yesterday was Mark Sumner telling us this. On Wednesday, see how outdated this story is? The William Barr-led Department of Justice announced that it was blocking an effort by the White House Oversight and Reform Committee to obtain census information. See how complicated this is already? From Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross through what has now become standard practice in the Trump White House, declaring that all the information is covered by executive privilege. Following that action, the Oversight Committee voted to hold both Barr and Ross in contempt of Congress. Maybe. I don't know what the wording of their resolution is. And as you know, we're getting away from that in the formal wording. The key information being sought is how Ross came to place a question about citizenship on the 2020 census. That question, which seems designed to drive down census participation, could have an impact on exactly what the national enumeration of the census is intended to do. That's a quote, I guess, direct from the Constitution, the charge to conduct the census every 10 years. Anyway, it's supposed to, what is the census intended to do? Provide for fair representation in the House. But who cares about that, right? Which makes the reasoning behind including the question of direct and intense interest to Congress. But Ross has refused to provide critical documents discussing the question and its addition to census forms. Barr's action highlights the fact that it's not just in the Russia investigation or even in examinations of Trump's finances that the White House is denying Congress's oversight role. It's even in unrelated matters that are of the most vital interest to Congress. Most assumptions have been that what Barr, Ross, and Trump don't want coming out are records that directly show that the citizenship question was recommended by right-wing think tanks as a way to reduce participation by specific groups of both citizens and non-citizens in the census. But the denial of Congress's role in anything that government does has become a force of habit. Since Democrats took control of the House in January, the only testimony or documents that the Trump White House has agreed to provide are those that were included as part of a deal to withhold a contempt vote on Barr in the Judiciary Committee. Or rather, not to bring their contempt resolution as then currently worded to the floor of the House, anyway. And no matter what the topic, the way in which Trump is using executive privilege must be challenged in court immediately and effectively. I have a sound effect for you on that. Yeah, all right. Because the way it's being applied at this point means that Trump has a literal get-out-of-jail-free card for any possible issue. And it means that congressional oversight isn't even a theoretical possibility. I remember there was a dumb guy on Daily Kos who in 2007, I guess, wrote a continuing series of articles, most of which were entitled some variation of, "You're not getting your oversight." Remember when that was at the 2006 elections? Nancy Pelosi says, "Put us in charge in the House of Representatives because we'll have oversight power. We'll have subpoena power. And we're going to do the right thing with our subpoena power and our oversight abilities on George W. Bush." And then we held some hearings. And, well, you know what happened then. George W. Bush continued on as president of the United States and nothing happened and nobody ever paid any sort of price whatsoever. And then he became a happy painter and was rehabilitated because the orange-faced idiot is so much worse. People began to think of George W. Bush as some benign grandfatherly figure when he was, in fact, a huge criminal. Anyway, the general understanding of executive privilege, Mark continues, has been that it applies only to direct communication between the president and top advisors. Okay? That's, again, I have to hedge for you, just like we were talking about at the top of the article. That is the way things used to be. That is the assumption that lawyers and judges alike used to agree on. And they would argue around the margins about, was this person a top advisor? Is this direct communication between them, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's just sort of, look, I don't know whether there was communications or not. I don't know whether this person is an advisor or not. I might not even be the president, but it's all covered. And it might not even be communications. Can I have that discarded wad of Sean Spicer's bubble gum? No. Why not? Executive privilege. Well, that's not how it works. Well, that's what I'm saying. And for the time it takes you to litigate whether or not I'm right or wrong, you're not getting that wad of bubble gum. Swallow that, Spicer. That's the end of that. And, that's only one part, I guess, of why it's such a huge threat to the rule of law. The rest is in here, I guess. So, again, the general understanding is that it applies only to direct communications between the president and top advisors. Top advisor tells the president, we should, whispers in his ear, we should put this census question on, whatever. That could possibly be it. But of course, a cabinet secretary not talking to anybody, but getting a report from somebody else who doesn't ever speak to the president, that would be a highly questionable application of executive privilege, i.e., no, there's no executive privilege on that. Period. The end. Anyway, neither of those understandings has held up under Trump. What do you know? Oh, the second understanding, by the way, is the understanding is that it applies only when directly claimed in connection with specific documents or testimony. In other words, You're not supposed to be able to say, I, Donald J. Trump, hereby call executive privilege on totally everything, from the menus to, things that are written by other people in Ottumwa during my administration, or possibly even before or after it. If it exists in the same universe in which I was president, I can invoke executive privilege over it. Neither of those understandings, of course, have held up under Trump. Not only has Barr insisted that Trump can apply executive privilege to documents that were never intended for his desk, such as the Mueller report and the census documents, but it has also been the position of the Trump White House from day one that Trump doesn't even have to claim privilege to claim the benefits of privilege. So there's one thing to say, I hereby invoke executive privilege over everything. But what if you're too lazy to do that, and you, at the moment you were supposed to say those magic words, you were stuffing your face with 14 scoops of ice cream with your pants down on a golf course? And the answer is, it doesn't matter, because me, Donald J. Trump, and it's okay if you're a Republican, and YOLO, LOL, nothing matters. There's no such thing as law. What is the law? The law is that which the people who I say are my lawyers utter. That's it. So yeah, that's a grave threat to the rule of law, because you can't tell what law is anymore. And nothing matters. Right? Okay. So now they're claiming it over not only everything that there is and things that weren't intended for his desk, but also you don't even have to make the claim. Supposing you have, like I said, your face stuffed with all of that ice cream. And, Mr. President, do you claim executive privilege over this? Okay. He didn't claim it. But you know what? He could have. If his face were empty at the time, he would have been able to utter the following words. Presumably. He could have read them off of a card, and he might have screwed them up. I hereby invoke executive problems. Oh, well, that should do it. No, doesn't even have to make an utterance. Here's what we're talking about. Trump doesn't even have to claim privilege to claim the benefits of privilege. In testimony going back into the first months of 2017, members of Trump's staff have refused to answer questions or provide documents on the basis that they might be subject to executive privilege. I don't want to answer that, and I don't want to give you that document. Why not? It might be subject to executive privilege. Well, if it is, then you can make that claim, and we can litigate it. Well, my point is that might happen. Right, and my point is that hasn't happened, so give me the document, because absent a claim of executive privilege that gets adjudicated, I'm entitled to that document. Well, you're not, because you might lose in court. Well, I won't lose in court here on this one because that claim hasn't been made. You see the difference? And knowing that most people just can't grasp the difference, I guess, and including perhaps the officials answering the questions in front of Congress, they say, yeah, but it might. That's all that really matters. And why should we reveal something to you that you could then use against us if later on we might find out that there are 5 robed justices who will say that you shouldn't have had that in the first place? And they would never understand anything like, well, okay, but if you were litigating a case and it turned out that you were not supposed to have access to that information, and judges all the way up the line upheld that assertion that you should not have had that information, then that information would be excluded from the decision making if the judge was making the decision, or excluded from the jury if a jury was making a decision. But they don't believe in that. And I guess there's a sort of common sense level at which that might be understandable to people. Well, how do you really instruct a jury to disregard such a thing? And we have no problems with it when it might unfairly lead to the conviction of some disfavored individual or another. But otherwise, yeah, if it's like one of your friends, well, how can a jury really disregard anything? And that would be a legitimate concern. But then that shows a certain level of abstract reasoning ability that you claimed not to be capable of a few minutes ago when I asked you about Hatch Act violations or whether or not executive privilege has been invoked here, or whether your idea of executive privilege fits within the generally understood principle of what that goddamn thing is in the first place. Oh, what? Who, me? I'm a moron. You have to reduce things to my level. So anyway, there you have it. That's the situation we're in. I won't give you that information because the president might assert executive privilege and be totally wrong and lose immediately and lose on appeal and lose in the Supreme Court, after which time I guess you could ask me for it, but I would still refuse to give it to you because who cares what courts say? LOL, YOLO, nothing matters, right? And if I refuse a court order to give it to you and I'm convicted of criminal contempt of court, the president will pardon me anyway, and something, and the statement will be given in partisan fashion by Kellyanne Conway, who likewise isn't going to jail for anything or losing her job. That's the problem with this thing. So, okay, back to, I should let Mark give you his much more organized thoughts about this. So to recap, none of the traditional understandings of executive privilege have held up under Trump. He's just trouncing them and dancing on their graves. And we assert it over everything. Plus, we'll also claim the benefits of the privilege without even invoking the privilege, because it might one day be invoked, and that should be enough for you. So, picking up from there, that is, Trump hasn't actually exerted privilege over the information in some cases, but he could do that at some future date. So in the meantime, he enjoys the benefits of having that information withheld from the public while not actually claiming privilege, which would be a move that could be fought in court. In this action, or it's this action and not the refusal to obey congressional subpoenas, Mark says, that as of yesterday, anyway, in midday, has had the greatest direct impact over the last 2 years and continues to provide the greatest barrier to Congress in its oversight duties. This amorphous, go anywhere, for any reason view of executive privilege is a genuine wall. So long as it stands, Congress can't get a complete answer on any topic, and the members know it. Congress has been reluctant to take up the matter of privilege in court because it's been afraid of the ruling. What if a court did allow that Trump could exert privilege over members of his transition team? What if a court ruled that Trump could exclude the public from not just information coming to his office, but from conversations between underlings, and underlings working out the details of matters that determine regulations and processes? A ruling on these matters might leave Congress with less authority to ask in the future. Let's make a little analogy here. You still retain the power to filibuster judicial nominees so long as you do not use it. The Gang of 14 told the Democrats in 2005, we've preserved your minority rights here. You're just not allowed to use them. They're in a little jar filled with formaldehyde. You say it doesn't exist anymore, but I point to the jar of formaldehyde. You ask if you can remove it from the jar and use it. I say no. You say, doesn't it mean it doesn't exist anymore? And I say, I refer you to the goddamn jar. Is that not here? What kind of an answer is that? Ultimately, essentially, what this is all about is the proposition that if I move to or tell somebody that I support possible impeachment hearings in the future, even if it's just inching towards things, the whole process has to work itself out, and we need proof, and we got to move public opinion up, all that granted. That point, I would then support moving to impeachment, but I can't say so because if I do, it will be held against me by marginal voters, swing voters in my district, of which there may or may not be any, and I will lose my seat in Congress, wherefrom I frequently vote ineffectually on laws that will be ignored by the president. And you can see why I wouldn't want to give that up. What's the goddamn point, right? Oh, well, here in Congress, we make policy. That's what it's all about. We win, we fight and win so that we can make policy and make a difference in the world. Sometimes we have to sacrifice on what seems like principle to mitigate our losses. At least we haven't lost control of the House of Representatives, wherefrom we can pass things like the Hatch Act, which then, poof, don't exist because the president says, F you. What's law? Who cares? LOL, YOLO, NM. So, okay, back to Mark's article here, right? Okay. What if a court ruled all that stuff was okay? And so Congress is worried about that. So rather than actually face that, they just say, let's not ask the questions. It doesn't matter, he says, because as long as Trump is allowed the benefit of his maybe I will privilege, and especially so long as Barr is able to spread a cloak of privilege over topics as broad as the Mueller report and the census debate, then Congress has no power to collect any information. Congress is only concerned about endangering a power that it currently cannot exert. In other words, it has absolutely nothing to lose. And case law also suggests that it can have a reasonable expectation of winning in every one of these cases. But LOL, YOLO, nothing matters. Case law sucks. Trump should not be able to exert privilege over communications that were gathered by the special counsel as a direct result of legislative action. Trump should not be able to exert privilege over documents showing how the numbers that determine the allocation of numbers of representatives to the states are being decided. Trump should not be able to gain the benefits of privilege on the theory that he maybe possibly could raise that flag if he felt like it. All of these actions demand immediate, forceful attention in court, or Congress really should just go home and stop pretending. All true. And it only enhances the case, I guess, to say that even if you manage to get information or manage to find yourself in a situation where you felt like you could legislate without it, what difference would it make? You passed the Hatch Act. What does he say about that? F you. Not going to do it. That's a hell of a situation you find yourselves in there for not jealously guarding your prerogatives. But what did the founders know about that? Right? I'm sure they would have asked you to settle it at the next election. If there is one. And why not? Why have one? Elections, that's just law. No, it's in the Constitution. Whatever. It's a piece of paper. Okay. That's just sort of where we are. Okay. Let's see. I've got a couple other interesting things. If there's anything else of interest after you learn that. There's some good weekendish material. I should lean on that. There's some other. Should I save this for when? Yeah, maybe that'll help me make the decision. There's a fascinating series of tweets that Greg told us about last week, and I think he was having trouble digging them up for a little while, and he found them, and he sent them to me, and I thought I could share them and comment on them, but maybe we should wait for Monday so that he's able to join in on that, although by that point there'll be so many other polls, et cetera, and so many other fresh outrages. I don't know. We'll leave that one for now. We got another break coming up here, and then should I read you another installation of the China story? I feel very bad about that one. That's a fascinating story, and it really, though, would probably take the whole show to read through it, or very nearly the whole show to read through it. Maybe I can record it one of these days for days off instead of running reruns. I'm constantly threatening to read long-form stories this way and constantly not doing it because something. Other things get in the way. I have a lot of planning on these things to do, but I felt bad about that China story because I knew going into it that I was neglecting other things of more immediate import. 2, that I would never get through all the China thing. And then 3, I realized very quickly that I had started it, amazingly enough, on page 2 of that article, and it was still compelling. And not only that, but the information that I was looking for by way of summation, and I blurted out at the end of the show yesterday, actually was on page 1 of this whole thing. But I thought a very fascinating thing, by way of explaining what the hell I was doing with that thing, I thought, all the good stuff was on page 1, essentially, that the Chinese had been extraordinarily successful in their use of their closed command economy in turning free trade theory on its head. And that was disconcerting, at the least, because I don't know. I guess I came up at about the same time as Armando, and Armando's still more subject to this affliction than I am, but generally favorably inclined toward free trade. And it was always kind of disconcerting to see people that I often had a lot in common with ideologically on a number of other fronts, opposing free trade in principle, but never really 100% able to explain to me exactly why they were opposed beyond saying, well, free trade agreements hinder our ability to protect manufacturing jobs here at home. And that never really, I mean, as much as I like to see people productively engaged that way, I never really fully bought into that argument. And this was a very different flip side to it that I thought was fascinating, and we'll have to explore some other day. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yeah, another abrupt ending to the China segment. I'm telling you, that's a fascinating article and you should read it. If you never get around to it, and who could blame you at this stage of the game, I don't know. I do one day think that I will put together a large number of these long read pieces that I can pull out. It's probably good to have some of those ready to go regardless, especially when there's an emergency that comes up in the middle of a show day, which happens less and less frequently these days. But there you have it. Anyway, a fascinating view of, I thought, of what China was able to do, and one of the first really good arguments I had seen, at least with respect to not engaging in the same sort of free trade negotiations with closed command economies. It makes it very difficult. Basically, the whole premise of let's trade with China, despite the fact that it is opposed to our system of economics and governance in every possible way, the thought was, we'll so entice them with our McDonald's that they will be unable to resist popular pressure for liberalization in China. And as it turns out, a command economy is pretty good at commanding things. And so things like the things we're supposed to have here and are finding with increasing frequency are foreclosed to us, the great benefits of liberal democracy and the rule of law, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it has worked here, right? People's desire for McDonald's has caused them to, spend their money in certain ways, and that has driven market-based decisions by others who enter the same market to fulfill the same need, and everybody has presumably got the same right to do that within certain parameters, and, the whole free market economy theory, as you know, and the liberal democratic theory that the law affords everybody the same-ish opportunity to do, to enter the business, to enter whatever sector of the economy, and so on and so on, with various restrictions and various distortions, i.e., you can't do any of that if you're black, for instance, whatever, something like that. Maybe we'll just throw that twist in there. But the Chinese, with their command economy and their command style of government, authoritarian government, authoritarian government is the structure that enshrines the concept of LOL, YOLO, and M. What the chief says goes. And if it doesn't make any logical sense, A, who cares? And B, if you persist in making a scene about this, sir, we will have you arrested. You need to calm down. Just be happy with the 32 flavors of ice cream available to you. If a 33rd comes out, fantastic. If not, and you insist that you are, if the 30 or 32, I guess the 32nd one, if the 31 flavors are available, you have no complaint. If a 32nd shows up, great. If there's only 30 and you make a problem for us in a way that we perceive as possibly being believed, look, we cheated. We made 30. We made 20 flavors of ice cream and pocketed the rest of the money that we were going to spend making the other 11. You point out that hypocrisy. 1, you're under arrest. 2, I hereby declare the number 20 to equal the number 31, and that's it. But that's ridiculous. How can you possibly? Well, in an authoritarian regime, I can. No, you can't. You can't make 20 31. No, that's true, except I can make everybody say it, and everybody who won't goes to prison. Now, what is 20? And your answer suddenly is, I think it's 31. Or I object, I resist. Well, okay, gulag for you. No one remembers you. That's bad, right? We don't like that. So I wasn't really necessarily intending on going this direction. But here's another long form day we could spend. I could do a week on this, maybe 2 weeks. And I need to, because I have already in mind, by the way, on alert, that I think next summer will include a 2-week vacation period for me. Another big trip in the planning, but it's still a year away. And I'm being asked about it. How would I feel here? And I'm in the world headquarters about a possible 2-week gap in the new show production. And I say, how would I feel? I would feel terrible, but I would very much like to take this vacation. Maybe I can prepare for it ahead of time. So I have a year to get you ready for that one. I'm warning you, it's going to happen. And see, I could fill up tapes for 2 weeks on A, this China question, and B, something that actually is trending today. That is to say, and I'll bring it up because it makes for a fascinating subject, and you can all discuss it. And maybe you guys can discuss it even better than I can over the weekend, and you make the tapes so that I can go on vacation in a year from now. Would you believe that this coincides with the dissemination on Twitter of Adam Serwer's article, I guess from earlier today? The illiberal right throws a tantrum. A faction of the religious right has concluded that if liberal democracy does not guarantee victory, then it must be abandoned. And I only saw this after having seen a retweet from earlier in the day. Let me scroll down and find it. I saw Greg Green retweeting it along with a entertaining GIF about it. Let's see. Where's the actual tweet he was retweeting here? Here we are. Look at this from Audrey Lord of Mercy, Bard and Bougie on Twitter. I guess the actual Twitter handle here is the Audrey Lord of Mercy, and you can I'll have this one out for you for sharing. But her tweet saying, it's useful for me to remember that when Brown versus Board of Education, when Brown v. Board said you couldn't segregate schools, some places tried to go, fine, no more schools then. That contextualizes Republicans responding to a black man's presidency by going, fine, no more democracy then. Link that, please, if you will, to the census question and the assertion of executive privilege. Link it to all the various racist incantations and explanations and various outcomes from the Trump administration, which are illegitimate and ought to be expunged from the record along with his election, but aren't because reasons, but also continuing cover up. Screw it. No more rule of law. It's okay if you're Republican. I say I don't have to give you anything. I'm not obeying subpoenas. Executive privileging everything. There is no such thing as the Hatch Act. I don't have to obey any of these laws. I'm not making a white power sign behind Brett Kavanaugh. Your eyes are lying to you, right? How much of this stuff is going on? But it's been going on quite some time. Yes. So right there, the invocation of, fine, no more democracy then. Which, like I said, coincided with seeing Adam Serwer's piece about how part, at least, of the illiberal right, the religious right here, says, you know what? Liberal democracy isn't working out for us because we're being defeated in the culture wars. So therefore, maybe democracy isn't all that helpful. Maybe we don't really want that. And, it's a long piece. It would take up the rest of the day. I'll give you a taste before moving on to the next piece of this puzzle, by way of giving you just enough to get you interested in reading it yourself or explaining what the hell I was doing wasting your time yesterday and then again today with the China story. Does everybody making these connections? I don't know. But here's a taste of it. By the tail end of the Obama administration, Adam begins, the culture war seemed lost. The religious right sued for détente, having been swept up in one of the most rapid cultural shifts in generations. Gone were the decades of being able to count on attacking its traditional targets for political advantage. In 2013, Chuck Cooper, the attorney defending California's ban on same-sex marriage, begged the justices to allow same-sex marriage opponents to lose at the ballot box rather than in court. Conservatives such as George Will and Rod Dreher griped that the LGBTQ activists were sore winners, intent on imposing their beliefs on prostrate Christians who, after all, had already been defeated. Anyway, you get the idea of what the landscape they think was like for them. And now, I'll continue on here. The rapidity of that cultural shift, though, should not obscure the contours of the society that the religious right still aspires to preserve. A world where women have no control over whether to carry a pregnancy to term, same-sex marriage is illegal, and gays and lesbians can be arrested and incarcerated for having sex in their own homes and be barred from raising children. The religious right showed no mercy and no charity toward these groups when it had the power to impose its will, but when it lost that power, it turned to invoking the importance of religious tolerance and pluralism in a democratic society. That was then. The tide of illiberalism sweeping over Western countries, not just ours, and the election of Donald Trump have since renewed hope among some on the religious right that it might revive its cultural control through the power of the state. Inspired by Viktor Orban in Hungary and Vladimir Putin in Russia, a faction of the religious right now looks to sectarian ethno-nationalism to restore its beliefs to their rightful primacy and to rescue a degraded and degenerate culture. All that stands in their way is democracy and the fact that most Americans reject what they have to offer. You get the idea, yes? That's not it. We're not done. Also being retweeted at about the same time, part 5 of a continuing series. You want to talk about how to waste a week from the New York Times on the same subject, with part 5 really putting an exclamation point on the whole thing, I guess. It's, of course, the final chapter in the series, and that's how you would design such a thing. The exclamation point comes at the end. Part 5, Can Liberal Democracies Survive in Europe? It's worldwide that the whole thing, the whole experiment is in jeopardy. Can't have segregated schools? Fine, no schools. Can't suppress votes and use democracy in distorted form to suppress minorities? Fine, no more democracy. We're done with it. It's not useful to us. Rule of law? Meh, not helpful anymore. Too annoying. We're going to do it this way instead. After all, has Russia disappeared? No, it hasn't. It hasn't collapsed into nothing, so, maybe it's not such a bad model after all. In the final chapter of our series, the writers at New York Times say, we find that many who are rejecting the political system and values that underpin the European Union feel the system is rejecting them. Who's the real racist here? One might then ask. Across Europe, populists are saying that it's not democracy they aim to discard, but liberalism. To end our series, We returned to Germany, the country at the heart of a liberal Europe, to see if the rejection of liberalism had also taken hold there. And it's accompanied with a podcast here, as well as a full write-up of the thing. Or actually, maybe the write-ups are separate, and I have bookmarked the podcast, which of course we can't just simply roll here because that would be an intellectual property violation, something the Republicans claim not to believe in. Anyway, I just want to make you aware that this is a broad topic under consideration worldwide by people in the media across the board. And it's not just here in the United States, and it's not just our lonely corner of the blogosphere that feels like the whole thing is under attack and possibly doomed to collapse. It's a real thesis worldwide by villagers and other very serious people. So you're not alone in all this. Yeah. So then there's that. Now, how do you follow that up and finish up a show with 10 to 15 minutes left? Well, there's really no way to do that. But you can go back to small bore issues and say, if there was such a thing as the rule of law, and we really were a democracy, what sorts of things would you worry about or find interesting or amusing or hypocritical and so therefore worth mentioning on a Friday afternoon? One such thing might be, for instance, if you believed in the rule of law, the process by which we set policy in this country, whether or not the actual factual outcomes of those policies are worth taking into consideration ever at any point in the process. If you believed in any of that, you might find this little small bore tidbit of some interest, as reported by the Washington Post earlier this week, June 11th. GOP leader concedes tax cuts may not pay for themselves as the 2019 deficit grows. So, it's just sort of a central tenet of the Republican Party. But LOL, YOLO, NM, we don't care anymore. We got what we wanted. And as Paula Ryder pointed out earlier in the week, or actually much earlier than that, but we only got around to rolling earlier in the week, they never cared in the first place. This was all just something they wanted to steal. And they thought at the time that history had shown them that they needed to distract the populace with something else while they robbed them. We are now learning from Adam Serwer and others that that might not be necessary either. You simply do what you're going to do and make sure the television stays on, i.e. that there are still 31 flavors, so that people can enjoy their entertainment and say, the rest of this stuff is hard stuff. It gives me a headache. And as long as you don't kill me, I'm cool with whatever happens. Heather Long reported this on June 11th, speaking to Kevin Brady, the lead architect, or a lead architect anyway, unless that's meant to be he's a lead architect, which is possible too, of the GOP's tax bill, suggested Tuesday that the tax cuts may not fully pay for themselves, contradicting a promise, can you believe it, that Republicans made repeatedly while pushing the law in late 2017. They promised. Well, LOL, YOLO, NM. Pressed about what portion of the tax cuts were fully paid for, Brady said it was hard to know. We will know in year 8, 9, or 10 what revenues it brought in to the government over time, but by that point, the bridge back to the point where we started will have been burned, and we will be at a point of no return. So, it's way too early to tell, said Brady at the Peterson Foundation's annual fiscal summit in Washington, D.C. Mind you, the Peterson Foundation's annual fiscal summit is all about not letting this sort of thing happen ever because something, danger, reasons. And I know the modern monetary theory people are laughing about this, but look, I present it to you just by way of how bad has the discourse been, and can we count on it remaining just as bad in the future? And the answer is yes. Remember also, this was where Nancy Pelosi showed up to complain about being asked about impeachment all the time, too, and also to cast her lot with the economic doom crowd and how we're going to have to cave on something later on and take away our ability to help people because the budget needs to be balanced, except that the people who claim that the budget needs to be balanced, when it goes out of whack, are LOL, YOLO, NM people, after all. So, continuing with the Heather Long story here, the federal government's deficit typically shrinks during strong economic times, but it didn't. I don't really know why. Normally, though, it shrinks during strong economic times, but the deficit is up nearly 40% so far this fiscal year. That seems like a large number, according to the latest Congressional Budget Office report released Friday. Spending is up $255 billion for the first 8 months of the fiscal year. This strikes me as a familiar pattern. I wonder if there's ever been a Republican president, because remember, this is Republican theory here. Has there ever been a Republican president who has harped about the deficit when a Democrat was in office, won office, slashed taxes, ballooned the deficit, and then declared that deficits don't matter anymore? Has that ever happened to any of us? Yes, it has. But again, at the time, you're forgetting there was television and beer and maybe even, people in skimpy swimwear to watch on TV. And so, yeah, whatever. I don't know. I don't understand all that money kind of stuff thing. And anyway, I don't have any of it, so who cares? This is for rich people to settle. That guy has a suit. He knows what he's talking about. Spending is up $255 billion for the first 8 months of the fiscal year, the CBO said, while revenues, can you do the math for me here, are only up $49 billion. It sounds like spending is up more than our revenue, and if we were sitting at a kitchen table, I would take one of these kitchen chairs and bash you over the head with it repeatedly until you died. Because you're so dumb telling me that we have to sit here at this kitchen table and balance things. These kitchen table chairs are extraordinarily uncomfortable. I would rather simply steal all the money and live in luxury. Can't we just get down to business already? Corporate tax receipts are down. Why? I don't know. After Republicans enacted the largest reduction in business taxes in U.S. history. But wait a minute. Here's a graph showing that because reasons, they'll be up. And they never went up. They didn't go up the first time. They didn't go up the second time. They didn't go up the third time. But, as they say everywhere, as you know, fourth time's a charm. If you think they don't say fourth time's a charm, you are under arrest. That is what I'm aiming at here with the help of my illiberal friends in Russia, China, and Hungary. We're going to get this done. Believe me. Corporate tax receipts are down. Individual income taxes are basically flat this year. They are growing less than the rate of inflation, we are informed. Most of the revenue increase is coming from President Trump's tariffs and more payroll taxes, which were not cut in the tax bill. Revenue fell. It didn't rise after the tax cuts, said Mark Goldwein, or Wine. I'm not sure. Goldwein, W-E-I-N at the end. Senior Policy Director for the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, which you should just disband. Just stop already. You don't have a job anymore. We're killing jobs in the hand-wringing about the budget sector. Brady's comments are a marked departure from the claim many Republicans made during the tax bill debate that the tax cuts would be fully paid for by additional economic growth that would, in turn, spur additional tax revenues for government coffers. It's almost as if they've told us this before and it didn't work before and we did it again anyway, even though none of us voted for it and you actually lost and you represent you held far too many seats in Congress for the amount of people you represent, and it's a hopelessly gerrymandered body, and so is the Senate, even though they don't actually have gerrymandering over there because stupidity of distributing the way we distribute our Senate seats in this country. And also, again, no one was paying any attention, and who cares? People in swimmer on TV, LOL, YOLO, NM, more and more. But, I'm not really sure how that one happened. How did they pull the wool over my eyes a 15th time on trickle-down economics? Amazing. But, they did promise it. And you know how it is with shame in this country or something. Character counts, yada, yada. Numerous independent analyses concluded that the tax bill would add substantially to the U.S. debt ahead of time, yes, which currently stands at $22 trillion, probably because Obama something and also Clinton. CBO estimated the total cost of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, remember, we're going to call it the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that's my new name for it, is $1.9 trillion after taking into account additional growth and interest payments. Anybody who tells you the fact the tax cuts are going to pay for themselves, it's not true, it's nonsense. You can use the full words of BS, said House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who knows what she's talking about for the most part, at least on this issue anyway, in an appearance at the fiscal summit shortly after Brady, at which she really should have used to say, I reject the premise of this conference, period. But I really don't, because a lot of rich people still believe that this is still classic economic theory. And remember, they are titans of industry because they graduated from economics education and liberal arts economics education, and maybe went on to get an MBA. And that's at the heart of this business, is teaching people these things and saying that they're facts. And I am successful, so they must have been right. I was educated properly. True, I am conscious of all my own thefts, but I push them aside and justify them, because otherwise how could I go on living? Because something, the power of shame in this country. And now I realize, oh my God, there's no power of shame. What have I been doing all this time? I could have been even richer. Why was I not cheating even more? And Donald Trump says, I don't know. I can't imagine why you wouldn't have done that. Anyway, but Brady said it was important to consider whether the tax cuts were a good investment, like the Iraq war, which also was going to pay for itself. And we're going to do it again in Iran, but that'll pay for itself too, I'm sure, because oil plus reasons. Brady argued there are very encouraging signs that the economy is performing better after the tax cuts, with strong job growth, improved wage growth, and higher business investment, except those signs don't exist. I don't think anything could have been worse for the deficit than to stick with the old economy and stick with the tax code that was so outdated, said Brady, who pointed to higher payroll tax collection as a sign more people are working now. The economy expanded at a rate of 2.9% last year, up from 2.2% in 2017, 1.6% in 2016, according to the Commerce Department. The White House predicts 3% growth for years to come, but nearly all independent economists expect growth to be closer to 2% for much of the next decade. LOL, YOLO, NM. Republicans say the federal government has a spending problem and needs to scale back, while many Democrats want to see higher taxes, especially on wealthier households. Wouldn't that be something? Do you think we could make that work? No, I guess not, because Senate. The GOP-controlled Senate, the Democrat-controlled House, and the White House are currently in the midst of tough negotiations on the 2020 budget plan. That'll bring us back to the thing we saved for Monday discussion with Greg later on. Keep that in mind. That's supposed to take effect on October 1st, but LOL, YOLO, NM. If no agreement is reached, automatic caps will take effect. Hey, everyone loves those. Plus, we'll have a super committee that will reduce both domestic and military spending by a total of $125 billion, a scenario few want in the run-up to an election year, but you know how that goes. House Budget Chairman John Yarmuth of Kentucky said the negotiations are not going very well so far. I don't think there would be any problem at all getting Senate and House agreement on funding levels, said Yarmuth, but he called the White House unpredictable. That's probably pretty true. The expectation is the Congress and the White House will eventually agree to lift spending even higher than it is now for, guess what? Well, they say both military and domestic programs. I think only military. Yarmouth's proposal would raise spending by about the same amount as the GOP tax cuts for the next decade, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. There is no center of gravity to reduce spending in this town, said Mick Mulvaney, Trump's acting chief of staff at the fiscal summit. That's true, and you're part of it. Mulvaney, you know him, former GOP congressman who pushed back aggressively against President Obama for smaller budgets, called Trump's budgets the most fiscally responsible budgets that have ever been drafted. And that's why the deficit grew by 40% in just the last year. But there you go. Experts disagreed. We'll have to leave it there. Literally, we're going to have to leave it there. And hand things over to Justice Putnam. I mean, really, literally, there's like a sentence left. Don't worry about it. And you can read it, of course. Justice Putnam will take it from here. That actually reminded me at the end of things. The president has been out there insisting that the speech he gave on the D-Day celebration is the greatest speech ever given by a president on foreign soil, or at least in Europe. This after having claimed the same thing about his speech in Poland, was it, in 2017? And nobody but me seems to have noticed. He used the exact same line over again. Very weird. Anyway, Justice has this coming up next. Squeeze a few things in here. Nancy Pelosi, says here, gave the press a tour of McConnell's graveyard, where bills go to die. That's actually the Senate, but I'm sure they set up a reasonable facsimile over on the House side instead. More after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Duncan Hunter's wife has pleaded guilty to conspiring with him to steal campaign cash. Right after Trump said he wouldn't report foreign interference if it happened again, the Republicans blocked that bill that would force campaigns to do just that. And even some Republican senators want to stop Trump from selling arms to Saudi Arabia. We'll see it. We'll believe it when we see it.